How are you doing? The
The
this?
side steps. Are
Oh,
good.
yeah.
They make me
Well,
happy.
it is much nicer. They've had them over on that side, but it's easier to have this way, I think.
You ready to go?
Yep.
All right, good.
How was your meeting? Good. Got it. Hi, Joe.
in my secret hiding place.
Okay, I've got you scheduled to give it to him right after the prayer. After the,
Now, will that get him out of here by
Yeah.
12:30?
it will.
Okay.
So this is right after the
Pledge of
welcome. Well,
Okay.
let's see. Yeah, I'm going to start the meeting at 20 after. Thank you very much, Alex.
Okay. That's excellent. Thank you very much for
Okay, Sandy.
juggling like that, because I know that's a little early start.
Yeah, we'll be fine.
Okay.
Testing 1, 2. You don't need to interrupt your lunch, but you do need to look. There is the two truths and a lie. So study that out by table. And listen to this just for this piece of instruction. Ron, could you get their attention? What I'm going to ask you to do during your lunch, see if you can figure out one or more questions. Pick somebody at your table to be your representative for the two truths and a lie discussion, and send your question up to me or give it to oh, he's not here today. Dang. Well, I'll tell him how it went. You know, maybe we're going to skip this part. I'll think about this. Yeah, we're going to do the two truths and a lie next time. We'll skip it today. Officially welcome everybody to our meeting today on the 30th of November. I hope your Thanksgiving month and week have been most enjoyable. Joe Garcia will give us our invocation, and that will be followed by Sandy McDougall with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please bow your heads if you're so inclined. Father God, we're thankful to be here today, to be able to come together and celebrate and be thankful as we have taken time this month and the last few weeks to be thankful for all that you have done for us. We remember to see your hand, how we see your hand, how we feel your presence, and we thank you for that. But I'd like to take a moment to thank you for the people that you put in our life that touch our hearts, that protect us, that take care of us, that make us laugh, that hug us when we cry. I thank you because we are blessed with those that surround us and are there to make our life better. Please be with them and bless them, and that we may be able to be for them what they are for us. Bless the food that we are sharing now. We thank you in your name. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Sandy McDougall will lead us in the pledge. And we're going to make a slight modification in our program. Sandy is also chairman of our Escondido Shines activity and will be making a presentation today. And I'm going to invite her to make that presentation after we have the pledge, and then we'll sing America the Beautiful after that. Our guest has to be at a meeting at 12:30, so we need to squeeze him through quickly. Thank you.
Put your hand over your heart and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Jerry, would you come up, please? President Vaughn and fellow Rotarians, I would like to introduce Jerry Dunaway. Jerry is a gentleman that I had on speed dial on my phone, and this is first time I am meeting him in 30 years. So Jerry is the supervisor in charge of the graffiti removal for the city of Escondido. Jerry, we have this certificate of appreciation for you. On behalf of the Rotary Club of Escondido and Escondido Shines, in appreciation for the tireless work that you and your staff perform while keeping our city free of graffiti and truly making Escondido shine. In addition, we also have the book, The History of Escondido. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Sandy, and I appreciate it. Thank you all for having us here today, and my boss allowing me to come.
Thank you, Jerry. This is the first time in history where our recipient of the Escondido Shines Award has received a standing ovation. So, all right, thank you all. Now we will be led in the America the Beautiful by Dollar Bill Smith.
And even better, Amber Smith. So got to on this song. I want to tell you a little bit of the history of the song. There was a teacher from Wellesley College in Connecticut, right, who was on vacation or in Colorado Springs, and at the top of Pikes Peak, she was looking out on the plains and was just amazed at everything that she saw. So she began writing a song, this song. And then this was in 1893. And then years later in Newark, a church organist named Samuel Ward wrote the music to it that we use today. Other people had written other music, but this is what stuck. He wrote it on a trip from Coney Island to New York City is when he wrote the music. He died in 1903. He never got to know that the music he'd written had become so popular. She lived long enough that she got to know her song was popular. So she lived long past that and got to see that. So anyway, that's the song, America the Beautiful. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of gray, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherly from sea to shining sea.
Thank you, Bill and Amber. Member moment? Okay.
I have a member moment. For some of you might remember, Jim Byler, who remembers our club. Both of his sons are, and his son, Greg, recently died of cancer. Last Tuesday, they had the service. So, Jim, I think you would appreciate it all. But I was able to attend the service, and Greg actually planned it all out before he died. One of the things that moved, I think, everybody in the audience was he had a message. And there was hundreds of people. And message, he asked, made his whole thing, if you had one last message to give the central audience, what would it be? And want to know your answer.
I've heard it. It's a great message. You need to talk to the mayor. Yeah, it's a, yeah.
Share the message. Well, when the guy was talking, he was telling how he was developing this message. And of course, we were all about it. His message was in his faith, in his Christian faith, and his belief in Jesus. That's what he tested on. It was very moving.
Very moving. Thank you. Okay, so back to the routine. Those who have guests, please stand, and with the guest as well, please stand that we might get acquainted. Start with the mayor.
I have with me Elias Velasquez. Elias is local. He grew up here. He went to charter high school, went off to college. And last summer, he volunteered as my intern, and then he went off to work for an education foundation up north, but he's back down here and he's serving as my intern till he starts new work in January.
All right.
President Vaughn and fellow Rotarians, pleased to welcome today my wife, Irene.
Irene, thank you for coming.
President Vaughn, fellow Rotarians, pleased to introduce David Zumaya, JP Catholic University, and our Rotaract team coach.
Welcome back, David.
And our online Rotarians, our Zooming Rotarians are Chip Lanzi, Ken Manel, Irv Erdos, John Steele, Keith Rickenbacker, and Charito Rickenbacker.
Hi, everyone. I believe we have one visiting Rotarian today. Would Jean Russo please stand? Welcome, Jean, from Rancho Bernardo Sunrise. Thank you for joining us. And we'll go ahead and start with our song. Howdy, we're about to have you here. Welcome, we'll sing it loud and clear. Relax, enjoy the program. Then come you come back and see us again.
Thank you, Kristen. Okay, as you look through this calendar, you may be interested to notice that we're going to be celebrating the holidays on the 21st and the 28th. Uh-oh, we've lost. So just so you know, we won't be eating lunch on those two. There we go. So next week, the Majalet Dance Collective is going to be entertaining us. And then the following week is the Christmas program. And I think that's the San Pasqual High School Singers, right? Yeah, that's always a great program. So look forward to that. Andrew, you have some official business, I understand. And then following that, we invite Wendy Jo to come up and give her announcement on the bell ringers. Wednesday, you'll see what's coming there. Okay.
It's that time of year again. We're getting ready for the next Rotary year, 2022, 2023. And we have put together a slate of officers and board members, which you get to vote on next week. So coming up into the ranks of our officers, Alexander Keegan has been proposed to be the vice president next year. And on our board, we actually had a little bit of turnover this year. So we have 3 new proposed board members. Wendy Schaefer, I almost said Schaffer, I am so sorry. Keith Rickenbacker and Steph Holden will be joining the board. With your approval next Tuesday. We'll have the slide again and we'll all vote then.
Thank you.
Hi, I am so happy to announce that for ringing the bell at Major Market for the Salvation Army on December 18th, it was on the slide here for the 19th, it's not, it's the 18th, it's all filled up. So we have all the volunteers we need for that date. Thanks, guys.
Wendy has volunteered to take the place of Erica Schwarm. We miss her with her complicated schedule, but we're excited to have Wendy Jo filling the slot there. All right, I'm going to go ahead and give you a heads up. We'll do this next week. I just left Larry, and so I'm surprised he's not here, but he had something come up. So he's going to be the 2 truths and a lie. I'll let you look at those next week, but I thought we'd let Irv get a little bit of glory in the moment. Irv, thank you again for doing this. He's watching. There is little Larry getting a ticket. And here are they celebrating their 58th anniversary. And here he is working and doing some amazing things. And one of those is a lie. So ponder that for the week. Yes. All right, so you've given them a hint there. That's good. Okay, we're going to sing a song now to Kathy. And I hope Jay elected me to write this one. So I hope you know the song, Smile Though Your Heart is Breaking. Da-da-da. Anybody know that? Okay, good, good, good. All right. So we're going to sing this to Kathy. And this is for hospice, obviously. Smile though your heart is breaking. Smile even though it's aching. Kathleen Gordinier will bring comfort and cheer. Lift your thoughts, you'll find hope and caring. Hospice is ever sharing. You'll find that life will be worthwhile with Kathleen's loving smile. Verse 2. 22 years in hospice caring, director of bereavement, social work sharing, graduated with master's degrees, equally serving her family. Director of Hospice Operations, edifying lives of quiet desperation, seeking to make their lives worthwhile with Kathleen's lovely smile. And Doug will make the introduction.
President Vaughn and fellow Rotarians, it gives me great pleasure to welcome our speaker today. You know, in thinking ahead about programs, I realize that every one of us have and will continue to experience loss of people that are important in our lives. And I'm grateful that Kathleen is able to come today and talk to us about the grief process, because it's real and has its own life. And I think it's one of the hardest things to deal with in people's experience and least understood. Kathleen was born in Texas. Fortunately, wandered out here some years ago to marry a friend. You know, currently she serves as Director of Bereavement and Counseling Services at Elizabeth Hospice. She's been with the hospice for 9 years in a variety of roles and in other hospice settings for over 22 years. She brings an incredible wealth of experience. Education includes a Master of Social Work from Texas State and Master's in Healthcare from Cal State East Bay. As I mentioned, she's married. She has 2 teenage boys. She met her husband at Austin City Limits, which I assumed was line dancing, honky tonk, but actually it's a large outdoor multi-entertainment complex, I was informed. Her interests are travel, hiking, CrossFit, and of interest, continuing last week's tradition, she and her husband are Harley Davidson enthusiasts. And so I had a vision of her showing up with motorcycle boots and leathers and tattoos, but quite a different appearance, as you'll find out.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. I'm honored to be here. I first want to start off by thanking you all for your continued support of our children's bereavement program. We would not be able to provide those services without the support of people and organizations like yourself. Oh, okay.
Ignore the man behind the curtain. Keep talking.
Okay. Doug asked me to talk to you a little bit today. I'm not used to speaking on the microphone. So.
People can't hear.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, talk.
Okay. So I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about grief and what the process of grief is and what that looks like. So what grief is, it's experiencing the psychological, social, and physical reactions to the perception of loss. Now, should I do this? So grief actually can be like a tidal wave coming over you when you experience this. And it has all manifestations in all those different forms, the physical, emotional, psychological, and it can be quite overwhelming for some people to experience. So we'll move on to talk about mourning. So mourning is the conscious and unconscious process that helps us to undo the psychological ties that bond us to the loved one. And part of that process is adapting to the loss and reorganizing your life around that loss and learning how to live a healthy life without that loved one any longer. So bereavement is the state of having suffered a loss. And when we look at grief work, it really is work. It is a great amount of energy, physical and emotional energy, to complete and work through the tasks and the process to successfully resolve the grief. I don't think you ever get over grief. You just learn how to live with it and build your life around the grief. And grief may resurrect old issues and may bring up unresolved conflicts from the past. Oops, sorry, wrong way. So some of the responses to grief and can be avoidance. There can be shock, denial, disbelief that occurs because in the beginning, we may not want to accept that that loss has actually happened, right? It takes a lot of energy to do that. It can cause a lot of mental confusion. There can be like a mental fog, not being able to think clearly. It may take all your energy just to take a shower and deal with the tasks of life. There can be a confrontation. There can be feeling of intense emotional state, kind of repeatedly kind of learning. And this is more like a subconscious and a physical level that, you know, you're waking up and remembering every day that, okay, this person is gone, you know, and experiencing that over and over. It takes time for that to really sink in on the unconscious level because of those psychological bonds we have with that other person. And accommodation can be the decline of acute grief and kind of learning to move on, you know, carrying that love of that person with you, but learning to live with that loss. The effects of grief can be profound. The emotional effects can look like shock, fear, guilt, anger. There's an intense longing for that loved one, wanting to see them, wanting to feel them, wanting to be with them one more time. Intense sorrow can be feeling very disorganized, not be able to keep, you know, doing tasks that you normally do. Depression and confusion can result. Socially, it can be restlessness. Some people withdraw from their lives and kind of isolate or become dependent on other people. And physically, there's a very intense reaction to grief physically, because part of grief is a physical process. It's not just emotional, it's physical in the body, adapting to that loss. There can be digestive problems, exhaustions, you know, sleeping too much, sleeping too little, headaches, because it can cause heart problems, weight loss gain. I mean, these are just very small lists here of some of the effects. I just try to hit some of the high points. The influences on grief, it can be kind of what coping behaviors you already have, what coping techniques you already use, your personality and existing mental health issues that are already there. Maturity and intelligence can affect how we process grief. Past experiences with loss and death, but each time we experience grief, it can be different. It's not exactly the same for every person we lose. Social and cultural and religious and philosophical backgrounds can affect the grieving process and any concurrent stress or crises that are happening at the same time. A big part of how we experience grief is your perception to what you have lost. So this could be, you know, some people lose someone they're dearly in love with. Some people, it could be someone that they had a conflicting relationship with. So there could be, you know, ambivalent feelings about it. So it really comes down to what you feel about what you have lost and what your relationship was like with the person that you lost. And that affects how you experience the grief. The qualities of the lost relationship definitely have an impact. And the amount of unfinished business with the lost loved one that you feel like you have. And then secondary losses, so subsequent losses can trigger, the experience of grief. So the duration of grief, like in our society, we kind of have this thing like, okay, 6 months, you should be over it, right? Well, I mean, you're never over it. There is no timeline. Everybody's grief is their own grief. It's their own experience. And there is no timeline. There is no getting over that. It could take up to 3 years or more, depending on the loss and all of those factors that I already talked about, for someone to work through the grief and get to a point of integration. Acute grief symptoms can subside in 6 to 12 months. And work of grief can last for years, where symptoms subside, then they come back up. I mean, it's kind of like the ocean, the waves. That's kind of how it comes. So I just want to express, it's a very individual experience. Okay. So appropriate expectations for someone in grief. It's going to take longer than most of us think. And it's going to take more energy than one can imagine for that person to work through their grief. It will involve many changes, and it will continue to develop. And it depends on how one perceived that loss. And it also entails what was lost and what was their perception of what is lost for the future. And there could be identity confusion, because who am I now without my loved one, right? There's a whole reorganizing of your identity, of your life. Styles of grieving, intuitive grievers, we say, is people that process through talking, writing, art, music. So kind of like sharing their grief with others. And some people process grief more instrumentally, like doing something. So problem solving, doing tasks, maybe doing some kind of project, something where they're physically doing something with their hands instead of, talking and expressing it. And there's not a problem with either one of these. And some people might do a little bit of both. So what can we do when, a friend, a family member, someone is experiencing grief? There's not really anything to say, right? Because it's not about saying words that's going to take away their pain. It's more about sitting and being with their grief and being with their pain, right? And bearing witness to their suffering. Grief needs to be witnessed, right? So that's what we can do for people who are experiencing grief, is really just listen. And they may need to tell the same stories over and over. They may need to talk about the person, remember things. And that's part of the processing it, is just, talking and talking. And I've heard people say that, family members, friends kind of get tired of hearing about, can you move on? You're still talking about that person. Well, it's going to take as long as it takes. And the best thing we can do is to be with it and let them express it. Avoiding cliches. Like I said, there's nothing to say to take away someone's pain. And we don't want to take away pain, but that experience and the pain is part of the process of working through the grief, right? We have to walk through it, to integrate it into our lives. We can't get around the pain. There's a lot of problems caused when we try to avoid pain in our lives, right? By using alcohol, using drugs, doing other things that are not healthy for coping. So the most important intervention is just to be there be present and listen. You know, a compassionate, gentle presence does more than anything that any one of us can say. Sometimes it helps to use the name of the person, you know, who has died, you know, bring them up. Stories maybe that you remember about that person. So that's keeping that person alive in, you know, the griever's heart. Listening patiently, reassuring that they're not going crazy. A lot of what we do in our grief counseling center is normalize grief, because people who have not really experienced it, they don't know what to expect. They don't know what's happening. You know, they can't remember things. They're not enjoying things they normally do. They think they're losing their mind because of the brain fog that can happen. So just being patient and listening and reassuring that this is a normal process that everyone goes through who's grieving. Might help them think through difficult decisions. I've heard there's no hard and fast rules, but I've heard people say not to make any major life decisions for at least a year after someone has passed, because it might not be, you know, it might be more of an emotional reaction than actually a good decision. So sometimes we might support that. There's no one right way to respond. And like I said, I think it's more important to be present, to listen, and just to witness their pain and not try to take it away. And reminding and maybe helping people take care of their basic needs, right? Are they eating? Are they getting enough sleep, drinking enough water? Just really the basic care for themselves. So sources of support we can explore with someone who's in grief is, you know, who in your life is supportive to you, and, you know, who is supporting you today? Who's the person you can call in the middle of the night when you can't sleep and you want to share some stories or memories or talk about your loved one? Who might be trying to protect by hiding your feelings? Who are the people in your life that do not feel good or safe for you to be around? So really exploring what's helpful, what's not helpful to the griever. So at the Elizabeth Hospice Grief Counseling Center, we have a variety of grief support services. And we provide these to our hospice clients as well as to members of the community who weren't on hospice. It doesn't matter. So we provide individual counseling for those who are seeking that. We have grief support groups, and we have a variety of different groups, and they evolve and change as the need arises. Like we have groups for people who've lost a spouse, people who've lost a child, you know, all different kinds. And like I said, it just changes as the need arises. And then we have our children's bereavement program, which provides peer support groups, school groups that we do in schools, and the Camp Sparrow Children's Camp that we do every year. And we also do mailings and different kind of things, other activities for people in grief who may not want to seek individual counseling, and provide information and support in that way. So do you guys have any questions?
Last night on Just News Hour, there was a segment about children and bereavement, and they were saying that because of COVID, between 140,000 and 175,000 children are expected to have lost a parent or parents, uncle, aunt, caretaker, grandparent. So I guess we're kind of blessed in our community to have something like the hospice to help grieve children or people who have lost. They were saying in many parts of the country, there are no programs like this.
Yes, and recently we have noticed an uptick in requests for grief counseling for children or grief support groups, and many of the children have lost a parent due to COVID. So we're starting to notice that showing up. And yeah, unfortunately, not all communities have children's grief programs. And fortunately, we're able to do that with support from the community. And I know other groups are trying to expand and provide the support in their communities for all these children. But I mean, at this point, it's getting to be almost an epidemic for the children who have lost parents. We get referrals from everywhere. We get referrals from hospitals. We get referrals from other hospices. We have lots of schools that call us. Yes, funeral homes. I mean, it's just a whole variety of different places. And we're actually pretty well known in the community for the grief support services that we provide.
Yeah, I have a question here. You notice a big difference in the grief response to somebody who has lost somebody who happened suddenly, you know, stroke or heart attack versus a long protracted illness, so they kind of know the path to the end is happening for a long time?
Absolutely. Some people would call that a traumatic loss when the loss happens very quickly and unexpectedly. So there hasn't been time to kind of do starting that grief process ahead of time, you know, saying goodbye and all that. Like you said, when someone has an illness, there's time to start working through some of that, what we call anticipatory grief, is when you know that the loss is coming. But yes, a traumatic loss can complicate the grieving process. That's a good question. Thank you.
I was just going to ask if you wanted to share where our services are available.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Bate. Yes. So we actually have a very large program. We have our grief support offices are in all of our hospice offices. So we have our grief services building in Escondido. We have an office in Mission Valley where we have our children's bereavement, as well as, you know, adult, individual, and group counseling. We have an office in Carlsbad and an office in Temecula. So we cover, you know, the whole San Diego County and South Riverside. And due to COVID and the Board of Behavioral Sciences allowing us to do kind of telehealth, that our counselors are able to do individual counseling sessions and group sessions remotely, being over Zoom, over the phone, whatever's comfortable for the client, so that more people are actually able to access our services now that couldn't, you know, drive to our office or have transportation. So, and we also are doing in-person individual grief therapy for people who want to come in and see someone in person.
So on the one slide, it was the what can I do slide. And I've, in my own personal experience and in the experiences I've seen, it seems like there's a period where everybody, like, you get a lot of support and then it drops off. And then that, what could I do? Like, there's got to be, is there a threshold when you know that if you're supporting somebody and their support is dropping away? Like, does it happen after like 6 weeks, 2 months? Is it variable?
I think it just depends, right? But you're right. Or soon after a death, like the, you know, family come, there's a memorial, and, you know, people are saying, what can I do? What can I do? Sometimes it's helpful to find something specific to offer. Like, okay, I can bring you a meal one day a week, or I can do something else that's really within your wheelhouse of what you're good at doing. I was reading about someone that had lost her spouse, and her neighbor, she heard someone up on her roof. Her neighbor was up on her roof clearing out her gutters. He just, you know, that was something he could do, right? That he was comfortable with, that was helping her. So I think it just depends on like what you can offer. But yeah, I think continuing to reach out and maybe asking what would be helpful for you. You know, I could clean your house. I could do your dishes. You need your laundry done, you know, so sometimes it's better to offer something more specific than, you know, I can help you when they're in a brain fog and they can't even really think of what they need help with. Right. That's a good question.
Kathleen, I think what I heard Colleen ask in part in her question, is there a time limit? Like, do I support them for a month, 2 months, 3 months? You know, at 6 months, if they're still not well, do I say, well, screw you, you ought to be well by now?
Yeah.
Stop bothering me.
Well, right. And I think asking the person, right? Because each person's going to be different on what they want. What would be helpful to you? You know, what can I do that would be helpful to you? You know, do you want me to call you, you know, once a week and check in, you know, because each person's individual on how much they want, right? So good question.
I actually have a question for you. And this is a little bit of a side shoot. Understanding grief is incredibly complex, and PTSD is incredibly complex, but PTSD sort of has the not as personal source. Is there any studies that have linked specific amounts of grief to PTSD? I mean, is there a linkage between grief and PTSD, or is it just more of an environmental trauma?
I haven't personally read anything about that, but there is an illness, as they would say, called prolonged grief disorder, or it used to be called complicated grief, which kind of mimics some of the PTSD. And depending on where you look, the numbers are different. It could be 3 to 5% of people grieving could experience that prolonged grief. And there are specific evidence-based protocols that our counselors are trained in and working through that complex grief. It's essentially like someone who's stuck in the grief and hasn't, you know, they're still in the acute grief phase 2 years later, right? Like they haven't even progressed at all. So yeah, we can, and that kind of is like in some way like PTSD, like re-experiencing it over and over. So yeah, so we have support to help people that are kind of stuck in that grief and work through that. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you all. Thank you.
Compliments of Alex Galinas. We have for you a copy of your song. Hope you'll remember us. Well, thank you, Kathy, for that wonderful presentation. We have a couple of minutes. You're going to get out 15 minutes early today. But I'd like to turn it over to some discussion. Joe, go ahead.
Sunday afternoon at Trinity Episcopal Church at 9 in Chestnut to find. Let's go to the end of 9th Street. But it's at 3 o'clock, and it will be a wonderful music with a small chamber orchestra, and also the Jewish men's choir. And I've only seen sort of videos of it, but quite entertaining. So it'll be a mixture of Christmas and Hanukkah music. Like tickets are available online at SW.
All right. Thank you, Joe. This gives me an opportunity to explain a little bit about these cards you see on your tables. Let me tell you how this all happened, because this is the work of Joe Parrish. How many know Joe Parrish? Some of you new folks don't know him. He has supported our club for a long time. He runs a printing business. And I remember when I was doing the CORE program, we needed a bunch of banners. We needed all odds and ends. And it was just drop a hint. And Joe Parrish was on the job. He was producing banners for Escondido Shines, for the CORE program. He was doing posters. Never once did he hesitate to say, hey, just tell me what you need. Never a bill, always doing it out of the goodness of his heart. And if you ever see Joe Parrish, you ought to grab his hand and say, Joe, thank you for your ongoing support of our activities in this club. I went to him and I said, Joe, one of my goals this year is to build relationships, and not just between us as members, but into the community. And I said to him, I'd like to put something on the tables that will remind people about building relationships and how Rotary is service above self. And that's the heart of it. You don't do service without building relationships. So they're the opposite sides of a coin. Anyway, he said, I know just what you need. And so he eventually came up with this centerpiece, which I think to his credit is just a great symbol of what we are as Rotarians. I hope someday you'll read about the history of that and how the wheel was formed and why. But we put these cards out there as part of our relationship building effort. I hope you've read it. It's on one side, it gives the date and name and interesting comments from any table discussion. You know, if we have a new person that comes and they say, I've got this experience, or my family is doing this or something, there is a great opportunity to build relationships within the group. If you'll just hand me the card, make a note. You know, Steph Holden told us about an experience he had. You may want to share this with the club, or you know, any number of people. Jill has been through we've all been through some strange things. Hopefully we're into these discussions when we're around the table where we get better acquainted. That's part of the program here. Member spotlight comments, any game response or a caption response. So any of these sorts of things, if you've got an idea about how we can do something that would be fun and entertaining or building relationships, just jot it down, give it to me, and I'll follow up with you during the week. So on the backside, desired topics for future speakers. My compliments again to Dr. Doug Moyer. I hope you appreciate, you know, he is always on the phone. He's very busy. And if somebody wants to replace him someday, be brave enough to ask him, what does this involve? And then if you still want to replace him afterwards, kudos to you. But anyway, Doug does so much, and he's always in the middle of other service activities, marched in the parade, and yeah, it's just fun. And the more we get involved with each other, the more fun it becomes. Members having interesting situations. One of the best things that I would love to see happen, I know it's hard for some reason, but somebody starts a conversation at the table. If somebody were to ask Robert or Linda, what did you guys do when you took off last week? And if they had an interesting experience and it's worth letting the club know, this information comes to me and I might share it with the board if it's something that they should be aware of, or even with the club if I get permission to do so. It's all part of the process of getting better acquainted between ourselves. One last experience. This morning, Larry and I were meeting with the leaders of Compact. Patty Huerta is just a wonderful person, given much of her life to serving the youth in our community. And we are working on potential items of interest to be involved as a Rotary Club with Compact. They have a lot of needs. And we met 2 weeks ago with Mayor Paul and got input from the city on things that they would like to have us be involved with. The three presidents, Roy, Colleen, and myself, had this meeting with them for the purpose of projecting out 3 years. What can this club do that would span more than just the remaining 7 months I've got, or Colleen's or Roy's full years? And Alexandra is going to be in that loop now. So we have 4 years of presidents coordinating where should this club go over the next years. When do we hit number 100? We have Alex Keegan, who's going to walk us up to our 100th birthday. And you're aware that the international president of Rotary is appearing to speak at the 100th birthday of our sister club just over the hill. The international president of Rotary is making that a special event. We're on the verge of that. So as 4 presidents preparing for that, what we want to do is we want to make sure that this club starts its second 100 years in a firm footing of service, tradition, and just a well thought through agenda. This card could be your source of sending an idea to any one of us that says, what do you think about this for an opportunity of service, or an idea, or something to create a new tradition within the club or reinforce one that we have. So now to the point. I asked Patty Huerta, just how significant was it when we gave you a certificate of appreciation? And she looked at me this morning and she said, oh my gosh, here is a person that's been recognized, I don't know how many times, as Citizen of the Year, in front of the whole community, in this room at their annual banquet, saluting people in the community. And she said, you know, that was one of the finest things that we've had. And I said, well, for somebody like you that's always up in front of people getting recognition, why do you say that? She says, people do not get enough personal recognition for the service they give. It's secondary. It kind of floats in and out. But when we handed her a certificate and it said, the Rotary Club of Escondido and Escondido Shines salute you, da, 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 da. So it's just part of our community effort. And the city does a fantastic job of that. If you haven't been to a celebration breakfast where they salute the leaders in the community, you really ought to come. And I compliment Paul and all the previous mayors that have done that. So here's the question. Okay, where is the question? Okay. There we go. Oops. Oh, we lost the PowerPoint. All right, darn. Well, what it was a certificate of appreciation. And in the middle of it, it said, your friend's name. So take one of these cards and either give it to me this week or next week with the name of your friend who ought to be recognized with appreciation for what they've done. Whether it's a person in a city position or a neighborhood or a good business leader or a religious leader. Sandy is in charge, stand up Sandy again. Sandy is in charge of finding the names and putting together the certificate. You would be invited to make the presentation. And we make the presentation here, we give them the book, and it's amazing how excited people are to get this book. Those were 50 books donated at $75 a book so that we could give these out to our winners of the certificate. Anyway, Sandy is the contact person. You can give her your recommendation card for a name or me, and we'd be glad to process that with you. So my thanks to you for making my first 5 months an exciting experience. This is a great organization and we have such wonderful people. The spirit of Rotary is strong and we want to keep that alive and growing. We've got 3 new presidents on the horizon that are terrific people. we're going to try and work together to make our 100th birthday very meaningful. And I hope you'll be here and be an active part of it and enjoying Rotary. Have a great week.